Hey guys, it's Aaron from RevitAuto here, and today we're going to be installing BC Racing Coil-overs on our 2004 XJR. Got a product warranty, all the different series of coilovers. We have the BR series, which is just your plain Jane coilover. Alright, so now to get to the good stuff. That's pretty. Super high quality. Look at that, they even threw in a couple BC Racing little koozies. Alright, well let's go ahead and get started on installation. So now we're going to go ahead and break our wheels loose before the tire comes off the ground. So I am going to stick my jack stand up underneath the subframe. Just like so. Alright, so in order to remove the factory air strut, you're going to have to remove this nut from the upper control arm ball joint, and then once you've accomplished that, there's a bolt, that big Torx right there. We have to remove that, and if we come up top into the engine bay, we have the hood open. You have to unplug this guy. It's just got two little tongs on both sides. You just squeeze. Then we have 4 nuts and an air line, and then we can finagle the air strut out. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this nut up here, and it's a 19 millimeter. So you just want to make sure you gently set down the knuckle as to not damage anything. You don't want it to suddenly drop and rip a brake line or your ABS sensor. So now that we got that handled, we can go ahead and remove the bottom bolt for the air strut. Alright, so we're going to remove the bottom bolt of the strut, and what we have here is a T60 Torx socket. Looks just like that, it's a star pattern. Ours is 1/2 inch drive, so we can impact the bolt off, and that bolt is located right here. So it seems that the outer tie rod is in the way, but since we have this whole knuckle loose, we can rotate this and it pulls the tie rod up out of the way. And here is our T60 bolt that holds the bottom strut in. Alright, so now we can go ahead and remove our air line first, which is a 10 millimeter nut right here. And then after that we can remove our 4 top nuts, which are, I believe, 13 millimeters. Now you can go ahead and remove all 4 because the strut isn't going to just drop and fall out. It has a slot basically, and it's slotted over top of the lower control arm, so it's not just going to fall. So the next step we have to do in order to remove our air strut is to get a little bit more throw out of the control arm. We're going to remove the nut for the sway bar end link. If you have the availability, I would recommend an air impact gun or electric if it's got enough torque. The only other thing I'm gonna do is get my torch and I'm gonna heat this nut up just a little bit just to see if I can free it up enough so it doesn't spin the ball joint inside of the end link. So there's a 15 millimeter. I have this stubby 1/2 inch drive 15 millimeter socket that I'm gonna put on my air impact gun. But first I'm going to go ahead and grab the torch and we're going to heat that nut up. So what I have here is a little propane torch. You can get these at most hardware stores or any place that sells any sort of home products. The only next thing I'm going to do is spray a little WD-40 on there, get my impact gun, get my socket, and voila. Almost every single time it works. Just remember to be careful what you're touching so you don't burn yourself, because everything's still going to be a little warm. So what we're going to do is just pry off the end link away from the sway bar. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, since the stud is at an angle inside the sway bar, I'm going to try to level it out, and I'm going to stick the floor jack right underneath the control arm, jack it up. Now that we have the end link unbolted, now we can just, it'll go at full droop, and just make sure you keep the knuckle pushed up a little bit, because your brake line will get a little bit of tension right here, so you don't want to break that. So then just push up, over, let it drop down, and pull it right on out. So now let's go compare our coilover. And there's the comparison between our factory air strut and a BC coilover. Our coilover is just maybe a tad bit taller, just because it is fully extended almost all the way up. And this is all the ride height adjustment that we have right here. So what you would do is loosen this lock ring with these supplied tools, and then you thread the entire coilover into the bottom mount. And that is how you adjust ride height. And then you have your dampening adjustment, and then you have your adjustment on preload on the spring. Alright, so let's go ahead and install our new BC coilover. Alright, so now that I got the coilover sitting in place, I'm going to use the floor jack once again and jack up the lower control arm, so I can use the floor jack to jack up the lower control arm and put nuts on the top studs inside the engine bay. So once I get the shock close to the top, I'm going to line the studs up. So now that we have the studs up out of the hole, we can spin our nuts on. And now we can get our bottom mounting bolt started. So we got our mounting bolt right here. If you guys remember, it's a T60. You gotta hold the hub up out of the way so the tie rod isn't in the path of where the bolt needs to go. And there we go. You can see right down there, right on this guy right here, that our bolt is all the way through the hole. So now we can go ahead and stick our supplied nut from BC Racing. So now you can see down there, I got my nut threaded on. So now see if I can push the bolt through a little bit. Alright, that seems to be enough. So let's go ahead and tighten her on up. So I got my T60 torque socket on the head of the bolt, same direction it came from the factory. And then over on this side of the strut, you might not be able to see it, but I have a 22mm wrench. So I'm going to hold the nut steady, And with the gun on the medium setting, I'm just going to tighten this thing down. So now we're going to try to guide our sway bar end link back into our sway bar. What we're trying to do now is to just work it back and forth in order to get it to go all the way through. And there you go, guys. There's our BC coilover install.